Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to Healthy Illini Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schrock. We're glad you're here with us. We are in the spring semester. We are almost to the end of the spring semester. And so we're excited as we see the weather start to change and graduation around the corner. But we still have conversations we want to have and some really exciting things that are happening on campus. And so I'm thrilled today to have a couple guests talking with us about Siebel Center for Design and some of the things that are happening there. I'm joined by two guests today. First up is Sid Patil. He's a fellow with Illinois Design Consulting, has his Master's of Information Science. And Sid, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm also joined by Neil Pierce. He is the Assistant Director of Lab Operations with Siebel Center for Design. Neil, thanks for joining the conversation.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So we live in an era where we see innovation and creativity occur at an incredible rate in all areas of our lives. And however, even with all the advances we're seeing in multiple areas, there's still more potential out there. We know that. But the question is, how do you cultivate that innovation? How do you teach it? Because if we understand that teaching is sharing knowledge that you have with someone, how do you teach someone to think and create in ways that haven't been done before? Because you're sharing unknown knowledge, essentially, is what we're talking about. And with the Siebel Center for Design, I know one of the conversations is around applied design thinking. Which sounds really cool, when you think about, that sounds really awesome. But what is that? Well, it's a tool for people to get there, but that really doesn't say much about what applied design thinking is. So I just want to start the conversation there and let you both kind of share your insights into it. What is applied design thinking?
Yeah, so the way we go about it is using a method called the human-centered design process, and this is really just a framework to help organize your thoughts. I mean, we've all been through different design processes in our life, even if we don't think about it. We've had to cook dinner. We've had to make that plan and go from, well, what do I want to have tonight? What would be good? What would make me happy? What would make my family happy? What would make everyone involved happy? And we have to take into account a lot of considerations, like what do I have in my fridge? What do I have to work with? Do I have a stove? Do I have time to make all of the things I want to make? So, even if we don't think about it all the time, we're all making those design choices. And the human-centered design process just gives you a bit of a framework to that. The way we represent it, we show it as a linear process of converging and diverging sections. So there are moments when you're starting out from a more blank slate and you need to generate a whole bunch of ideas. And in that process, you're sort of diverging. You're creating more opportunities, creating more options. But then at some point you get so many options like, okay, now I've got a list of 500 different meals. I need to make one. So we need to start converging down. We need converging down. So we bring that down and we start narrowing in on something. But that process is going to go back and forth as we get closer to that final result. And while we represent it as a linear process, we also know that's not necessarily the case. You might get partway through that meal, you're halfway done cooking, and you absolutely burn something. Or you realize you don't have the ingredients for that last step of what you intended. Now you've got to pivot, you're going to make something new. Or in my case, my kids walk in and like, no, I will not eat that. All right, well, I guess chicken nuggets are also part of the meals tonight. So, we are constantly going back and forth throughout the process.
I really like that explanation because it takes the kind of the overwhelming, daunting idea of I'm going to create something and gives you that pathway to get there, but also really points out that, human-centered design is something, like you said, we've all done. You just haven't given a name to it.
Yeah.
And so turning around and taking those examples of these are the things you've already done, you just didn't know this was what it is. Now we're going to turn around and use this idea and create something new, makes it a lot less scary. Because it really is, in a lot of ways, a familiar process.
Absolutely. Every time I share our taxonomy, it's basically a visual representation of what I just described, but goes obviously into much more detail. And there's whole classes on this. There's courses you can take with us on these topics. But every time I go through it with people, the first reaction I always get when I show it is this sort of like, well, duh, yeah, of course, I know all these things. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing there should be a surprise. Hopefully, if you've put thought process into doing something before, you've thought about the fact that you should do some iteration. You've thought about the fact that you need to at some point brainstorm for generating new ideas. You should create some prototypes to help narrow down and figure out which of those ideas is actually going to be fruitful. But by spelling it all out and just putting it in front of you, it's hopefully going to save you time because you don't jump into areas you don't need to be. I mean, I know I'm personally so guilty of, I'll be halfway through a project and then I'll start coming up with new ideas that I could replace it with. I'm like, well, no, I've done that brainstorming already. I'm not at that step anymore. And we talk about metacognition, so thinking about how you are thinking. And that to me is really important, because if you're not aware of your own biases, then you're more likely to jump backwards, or you're going to like be in the wrong space at the wrong time, and just waste some of your own valuable time there.
So again, this is for me, this is fascinating. We could stay in this portion of it for a long time for me, but for somebody listening to say this is great, but this is still very vague theory out there. So let's bring it down a minute and kind of give an example about something that's happening on campus that you're both involved in, that takes that theory of using the human-centered design methodology, taking that brainstorming everything, and let's give it an actual tangible, this is what it looks like in this particular instance. That project being Exposome.
Yeah.
And which again means nothing to me before I started talking to you, means nothing to most people that are listening, but we're going to educate them here real quick. So would you talk about what Exposome is, and share kind of like how this fits into this whole conversation?
Absolutely. So Exposome is kind of like the group of things, or just things in general, that affect your life. It could be something from as trivial as your dryer making some extra noise, all the way to you living in an area with secondhand smoke. So then we're trying to develop more educational tools, preferably gamifying the experience, of informing people that certain exposures in your life have long-term impacts on your health. So to identify those exposures, we had a team of researchers that actually identified what they were for various different demographics of people. And then what we're working on is trying to gamify that experience by making sure that the research, all of the human-centered research that we've collected, how do we put that forth in front of people, but at the same time not bore them, right? Because it's a lot of just research, and you want to showcase that research through an interactive or fun way. So we're trying to develop kind of like an arcade-like game that we can put in front of people. Also, it's not fully innovative, because at the end of the day, arcades have always existed, right? But trying to bring that education and like that research about the impact of exposures in your life, and then just bring it in front of people. Like, hey, here's a cool game that you can see how just like listening to dryer noise constantly probably impacts your hearing health after a long time.
Well, you say arcades have existed forever, which is, fairly true, because they've been around for a very, very long time. But I'm a gamer. Mm-hmm. I've been a gamer for a long time, less so when I had kids because I had other responsibilities. But I've been a gamer for a long time. And you're talking about a game that talks about health issues and health impacts and things like that. That's not a game I've ever thought of. When I think of games, there's you got your role playing, you've got your first person, you've got your open world, these kinds of things. Health issues is not one that I ever thought was a category that I would think of games. But I understand what you're saying about you're trying to gamify it and make it more relatable, more connected on that. Before we get to the gaming side, I want to ask about that a little bit. But before we get that, let's back up a hair and talk about Exposome and the health issues. How are you trying to connect with what health issues, maybe not specifically, but how are you trying to educate on health issues? Like what's the approach on that? Is it just simply like information, or are you in the game, are they walking through situations, or how are you making that connection?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of multiple factors. So we are presenting some information, but we're trying not to do it as here's a textbook page presenting of information. So throughout the gameplay that we've developed so far, you are playing as a specific persona. So when you first start the game, you select, I'm going to be a rural farmer, or I'm going to be a teenager living in an inner city, or whatever one of the personas you select. And then from there, you're going to be faced with a series of different exposures to different criteria. As Sid mentioned, they might be, things that seem kind of trivial or like, well, is that really a health impact? All the way to ones that are like, oh, well, yeah, obviously, we all know that will impact our health. But then what we're trying to show is that these things build on each other. And every time we make a choice on how we deal with those things, we're either going to be potentially negatively impacting our health, positively impacting our health, all of those options might cost money. They might cost time. They might cost, they could potentially cost friendships. I mean, if we're around people who are, having bad habits or bringing exposures that we don't want to us, and we choose to not be around them, that's going to impact our social life as well. So we're trying to present all those things, but then each time you're exposed, you're given some information about what that exposure is and what those impacts might be. And then the goal is, at the end of the game, you're able to go through and see more specifically. Like if you want to click in and see, hey, that noisy dryer, well, it doesn't seem that bad, but if it's running all night, every night, now you're not sleeping. And if you're not sleeping, we've all experienced sleep deprivation at some point, I'm sure. We know how quickly our health can go downhill if we don't sleep for multiple nights in a row.
So I love that Exposome is focused on educating people, educating on the health issues and how they relate. And like you said, the things that you don't think about, and kind of putting it into that real world, that experiential, interactive kind of way that helps it stick in your mind. Like you remember those kinds of things better than sometimes than when you just read it on a page, kind of idea. So that's the consumer side. But as we're talking about the human-centered design, I want to go the other side and talk a little bit about the development side, because I've learned over the years that there are so many things in my life that someone has a part in that I'd never even thought of, like, I have a cup here. Somebody designed this cup, right? Now, it seems like a basic design cup, but somebody had to design it. I don't think about that when I go about it. When I drive down the road, I don't think about the people who designed the roadways or where they went. So I want you to talk a little bit with the idea of health innovation and human-centered design. Talk about the different roles that have been. There's been collaborations. There's been lots of people involved in this. So would you share a little bit of that side and kind of give us an idea of how many different aspects go into making something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So with human-centered design, it's built on the premise of collaboration and iterations. So like the more formal definition of human-centered design is that it's just a problem-solving approach that's used to identify the unmet needs of a population through collaboration and developing iterative solutions, right? Very long and theoretical. But simply put, it just means that you're doing a lot of research where you're using empathy to truly understand what the problems people are facing. For example, with just a cup, it might be like, okay, they need a utensil or something to just drink something out of. So what are all the problems that people face? Then going into just people who are able to hold the cup, they can just, grab it and move on. But for the people who have some disabilities, how do we account for those as well? Or at the same time, not looking at the problem directly, but looking at analogous fields. Like how does someone in, I don't know, like a surgeon, for example, how do they use certain things when their hands are occupied? So bringing in that knowledge, not just from the users who face that problem, but also analogous fields, and consolidating that into some insights and like what we call how might we questions, which are just problem statements. We then go into working with our team collaboratively to start thinking of some prototypes. And the important part here is to remember that design isn't perfect. You're going to keep getting feedback and you need to keep making changes. So once we make those changes, then it just seems like the solution was always right here, and we know it's going to work because we have the data to back it up that it actually solves a problem. So using all of that research and working with your team to make sure like your biases and assumptions are in check, and then we help create some products that we know for sure that they will work.
And there's elements of just, at a basic level, there are people that have the medical background knowledge, the understanding of health and environment, and the people that just have the coding. I mean, if you're gamifying something, you guys have somebody to code it.
Absolutely.
We have brilliant medical professionals here in the building, but if I asked them to make a video game, it would be a nightmare because they don't have any clue how to do that. So you have to have that different aspects too, and that's where that collaboration comes in. Really, really, really important. It's one of the things you said is you're collaborating. It's UIUC and OSF, which is a hospital system in the area. If you're not familiar with Central Illinois, and so you have both those sides and working together to make this one thing. And I think that's really cool because you're getting the expertise from all sides of that.
Yeah. So yeah, we've so Sid and I actually came into this project sort of later in the stage. So we came in sort of at the prototyping point. By the time we joined the process, the research group had already figured out the premise. They had done some iteration, some idea generation, and figured out, hey, we think that the ideal solution to this is going to be gamified approach to sharing this information. We've done some research, so here is the information. Here are some of the exposures that we want to make sure we're communicating because we think they're underrepresented or not commonly understood. And it was then brought to us to help figure out how do we make this into a game. And we're actually working on, I can't tell you how many, like, I'll call them micro iterations we've had along the way, but we're on sort of our second large iteration. So our first one was we made a version that was effectively it was like a storytelling process. Yeah. It wasn't even really a game. It was basically a flip book where you'd make one choice, and it's like a choose your own adventure book if you ever did those, where you make a choice. Okay, pick page 51 next. So you move to page 51 and it gives you your next exposure, and you make a choice again and go on and on. And we presented that at the Jump Arches Simulation Center for the grant that this is being funded by. And we got some great feedback there. And we knew we wanted to make this really interactive. So we presented it with a large physical, a physical presence. So we had a big sort of tabletop. It felt like an arcade game, or not arcade game, more of a carnival game. We had a big wheel you could spin to get your starting exposure, and some of these really large elements that were like visually engaging. And we got some fantastic feedback both on the style of gameplay, but then also on the physical interaction. So we heard from several folks there of like, oh wow, I love this, but we don't have room for that in our lobby, or we don't think we could probably fit that in our space. So then we started thinking, okay, how can we go a little bit smaller but still keep it visually engaging? And then on the game side, we moved into something that was more true playable game. So it's not just a single storyline path. It is truly you could play it differently every time. And that's where we're working now, is we're moving into a digital format. We do have a coder on the team who's helping, because as you said, we can't do it all. We need lots and lots of different skill sets. And so Sid and I at this point are sort of just pushing along to get that next iteration done. Mm-hmm. And even that, like once we have a fully built arcade cabinet that is ready to go, it's not done. We're going to put that out in the world, and then hopefully we'll get feedback. We're actually working on integrating that into the machine of, can we track people's playthroughs and see what choices they're making? If we see everybody's making the same, I'll call them mistakes, or making the same choices that lead to negative outcomes for them in the game, okay, well, that tells us maybe they're not seeing one of our exposures as a negative, and we need to communicate that better up front, or we need to, make sure we're driving certain points home better. It's hopefully never going to be a static project.
So I don't want to run out of time, so I'm going to move forward a little bit here, because, again, that's fascinating to me. This whole conversation is really interesting, and I could just go down rabbit trails all day. But Exposome is such a good example of applied design thinking. It's such a good example of everything we're talking about here. And if somebody's listening, they go, I have a skill set, and maybe this skill set fits in somewhere, and I think this is really cool. Innovation, health innovation, I want to be a part of that. What opportunities are there here on campus? What opportunities are here through Siebel Center? Where does somebody go next? They want to they're curious. They want to find out more information because they want to, be a part of something like this. How do they get started in that?
There are lots of different ways. That's one thing I really like about Siebel, is that we are open for everybody on campus. It doesn't matter what college you're coming from, what your major is, what you're working on. It could be any project that you're wanting to move forward. And there's probably something for you at the Siebel Center for Design. So my personal area is I run all of the shop and lab spaces. So we have a fantastic makerspace down the lower level of the building. There's tremendous amounts of different tools and resources available for every student on campus to come in and make use of. And so if you're interested in prototyping, you're interested in learning hands-on skills, that's the great thing about our space, is we're not a job shop. We're not going to just you don't have to have like a file prepped and you give it to us and we make the object and give it back to you. We're going to show you how to use the tools. We're going to get out of your way and you're going to make it. So if you want to come in and learn to use a wood shop, or you use a laser cutter, or 3D printers, all kinds of different tools, you can come in and do that. If you're more working, you're more interested in classroom work, you want to learn more about this, we have a bunch of different options. So right now we have a undergraduate health innovation certificate program. It's 3 courses. It starts with the Introduction to Design Thinking, which introduces the design process. Design Thinking in Health Innovation, where you can learn how design thinking can be used in healthcare settings for innovative solutions. And then it ends up with Innovation Studio, where you would end up paired with a client to solve a real world problem using design thinking. We also have some other courses that are available, including in UX and ethics. And we now have a Gen Ed course, DTX 180, Exercising Empathy. So if you just want to start figuring out how do you put yourself in other shoes, how do you think from other people's perspectives or get their direct feedback so you understand where they're coming from. There's lots of those options.
So this is I don't want to say unusual, but this is not a typical thing to add into a lot of majors to have this health innovation certificate or these other classes in there. So if somebody wants to find out, how does this fit my schedule, or how do I get into this, or how do I register for this, or the programs, who do they talk to? How do they contact Siebel in order to get that information?
I think they can just visit our website, designcenter@illinois.edu, and all of our information is up front there. If they really want to talk to someone about courses, they could reach out to Amber Dewey Schultz, who handles all of our academic courses. And I just want to add on to Neil's that if you're interested, if you feel like coursework isn't the right thing for you, or maybe learning shop equipment isn't something you want to do, we do have a lot of other opportunities at the Siebel Center for students to just do part-time working, maybe work as a concierge, practice human-centered design, or work on the academic programs team or the research team, doing a lot of that human-centered research and seeing how it would apply in classroom settings. We have the media studio where you could try out and play with your AV skills. And one other thing that we do have is called Illinois Design Consulting, which I oversee. So for that, we work with clients and provide human-centered design services to them to help alleviate their challenges through human-centered design. And this is also an opportunity for students, faculty, and staff to apply design thinking to real-world projects. So they get the experience of going through the whole process and trying it out, but also knowing that the work they're doing has real-world impact for some other client. And I feel like that, yeah.
And they get to try it with supervision.
They get to
before
try
they
it.
Get in, before you're in the quote unquote real world, you're thrust out there. It's like, hey, try this, and you may or may be on your own. This is a really supported space to try that kind of stuff, and I love that, because we've done some things with with groups on campus where they've helped us with McKinley things. It's a real world problem. It's something that we use. It's not just an exercise. It's something that's part of our marketing or our plans, and it gives them experience. It gives us an opportunity to be a part of that. It's one thing I love about this campus is that those opportunities. So that I'm thrilled to hear those kinds of things on there. I just really appreciate you coming in today. Like I said, I could talk forever, but I don't want to take up too much time on this episode. But I just really appreciate you shedding some light on the idea of applied design thinking, on the idea of human-centered design and Exposome, just everything that's happening there. It's really exciting stuff that's going on. And so, Neil, Sid, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us today.
Thanks for having us.
One of the greatest things about colleges and education is there's opportunity to try something new, something you've never done before, to whether it be a full-on jumping into a major or just dipping your toe into something and seeing what happens. And Siebel Center has a lot of opportunities for that. No matter what your level is, what your skill set is, what your interests are, there are opportunities there to just kind of test the waters, to find out and to learn something. So I really encourage you to reach out to them, find out if there's a fit there, see if it fits in, if you're a student, see if it fits in your schedule. If you're someone else, see if there's an opportunity to be a client, something along those lines. But just reach out and ask the questions and find out, because you don't know what you don't know, and you may find an opportunity that really opens a lot of doors for you. But thank you for joining us today. You're on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.